and Mrs. Gildersleeve, the matriarch. We're not hostages. We're going to remain here. It's your fault that these Indians are here. Have you listened to them? We're not leaving because you'll kill them if we leave.
Once they realized no one was being held hostage, the senators hoped to persuade the protesters to stand down by offering to convene hearings on their concerns sometime in the future.
We knew that a put-off, a stalling tactic would happen once there was no threat to any other lives other than Indian lives. You are going to walk away from here and say after a while, Doksha, you know? And we're not going for Doksha anymore. We're not going for later anymore, Senator. I told you over the phone that I bet, and everybody here and down there have bet with their lives.
AIM decided that their strategy would be to confront the government and try to win the public relations battle. Prior to that time, being a Mr. Nice Guy didn't really work with the government. They didn't give a damn. So that's the reason that AIM thought this was the way to do it.
250 armed U.S. personnel now surrounded the village of Wounded Knee.
I felt good. This is why AIM was alive. This is why we came to be. To stand up against the FBI, stand up against the U.S. Marshals, stand up against goons, you know, tribal police. And inside, we've got freedom. Don't let nobody in.
Since its founding in 1968, the American Indian movement had been divisive, its militant tactics controversial even among Native people. Created in Minneapolis by young urban Indians fed up with police harassment, the group had shown a knack for generating publicity. Members had seized high-profile symbols, Plymouth Rock, the Mayflower, Mount Rushmore, and in November 1972 had occupied and vandalized the Washington headquarters of the Bureau of Indian Affairs. Weeks later, in early 1973, AIM took its campaign into the reservation border towns of South Dakota.
In those days, there was a tremendous amount of racism, especially in the border towns around the reservations. I mean, real racism, where Indians are practically invisible.
There was towns you didn't drive through, you didn't go through. Especially women, you didn't walk down the street of any border town by yourself because you'd be accosted by any white man that felt like it.
Just weeks before the occupation of Wounded Knee, a white man killed an Indian near Custer, South Dakota, 50 miles from Pine Ridge. When local officials charged him with manslaughter, not murder, 200 angry AIM protesters came to town.
And you charge a white man premeditated murder. You charge him with second-degree manslaughter. And we ain't going for it anymore. And I know this whole damn town is an armed camp.
Hey, listen, white man. I have had all the bullshit from your race as I can take.
When police barred them from entering the courthouse, AIM members forced their way in.
Just as we walked into the door, then we were attacked by law enforcement. We were fighting, and they come at me with the nightsticks, so I blocked it and took it away and started using it on them. I know I was right on the steps, and things were happening. We bloodied the guy, we took the helmet away, we bloodied him up. Then I ran across to help get gas from the filling station. We're filling up, making Molotov cocktails and busting the bottles on the building, and the fire just started on the wall and everything.
Protesters set the courthouse ablaze and left Custer in shambles.
There was absolutely an element in AIM that considered itself a revolutionary organization who were comfortable being around guns, who absolutely loved the idea of AIM being outlaws, who just wanted to get it on.
The confrontation in Custer caught the attention of the Oglala dissidents on Pine Ridge. 3 weeks later, when their campaign to impeach Dick Wilson failed, they asked AIM for help.
Calling it AIM is attractive, but it's a roll of the dice. It's a roll of the dice because where AIM goes, chaos often follows, so that when those traditional chiefs bring in AIM, they're doing this in full knowledge that as they go down the road, they don't know exactly what's going to happen.
The Oglalas had exhausted all legal options. They believed that to put an end to Wilson's harassment and intimidation, they needed what AIM could offer.
AIM can bring bodies, they can bring people. They have the phone numbers of people at TV networks who can get on airplanes and bring television cameras out. None of the established national Indian organizations can do what AIM does.
The American Indian Movement's motto was anytime, anywhere, any place. And that was the most important job that we could do, is to be where there was injustice and to confront it.
At a crowded community meeting, dissident Oglalas, 5 traditional chiefs, and AIM representatives finally arrived at a radical plan. Together, they would seize the town of Wounded Knee. They would force Dick Wilson from office, and for the first time in nearly a century, draw national attention to Indian concerns.
The Oglala Nation is at a crossroads that can change the course of history for Indian people all across the nation. And I would like to ask that the chiefs listen very closely to what is being said here.
There was this hesitation. No one could make a decision, and no one would endorse us. And then the women started to talk.
Ellen Movescamp, a founder of the Oglala Sioux Civil Rights Organization, argued in favor of occupying Wounded Knee.
This has been going on for a long time before we invited the American Indian Movement here. Because the people were scared, and they are scared of Dick Wilson and all his men. I don't see why all these people come from all over. I don't see why they can't take him and throw him out or throw him in jail or something, the way he's been terrorizing people here on a reservation. And I live in Pine Ridge at that gunpoint, but I'm not scared of them anymore.
She was pushing, and she was pushing to spark something. And oh, it did.
Finally, Foolscrow, the oldest traditional chief present, spoke. Go ahead and do it, he said. Take your brothers from the American Indian Movement and go to Wounded Knee and make your stand there.
Today a teepee was set up in what is now called the demilitarized zone. Both sides are meeting there to negotiate an end to the takeover, but the progress is agonizingly slow.
There were negotiations going on almost always during the occupation. Attempts on both sides to reach some sort of agreement.
Government negotiators were uncompromising. They rejected demands to uphold treaty rights and insisted that they were powerless to remove Dick Wilson, regardless of the charges against him, as he was chairman of a sovereign Indian nation. Talks stalled completely when the protesters demanded to deal with the U.S. Secretary of State.
I understand they want Henry Kissinger out here. Do you think this is realistic? You think he'll come?
Why not? You know, I don't see why the North Vietnamese should take precedent over the American Indian people. You know, we've been fighting this war for 400 years, and if he can spare the time to go over there, he should be able to spare the time to come here.
But it will be correct to describe the current situation as an impasse.
If there's such a thing as an impasse on an impasse, then that's what we have.
Officials from the Departments of Justice and the Interior took the lead in negotiations. The attention of the White House was elsewhere. on the unfolding Watergate scandal.
There was no question that the White House was distracted during this Wounded Knee siege. Although they sent mid-level officials out to run this siege operation, they didn't have their mind on it. Nixon had his mind on trying to survive the Watergate thing. Things might have turned out a lot differently had they not been distracted.
Turn that fucking light out!
Within Wounded Knee, the days were relatively calm, while the nights exploded with gunfire.
Just take these unarmed men and tell them knock the light out or I'll shoot the fucker out.
They were shooting machine gun fire at us, tracers coming at us at nighttime, just like a war zone. We had some Vietnam vets with us. And they said, man, this is just like Vietnam.
There was actually a third force at Wounded Knee, in addition to the Indian activists inside of Wounded Knee and the federal marshals and FBI agents surrounding Wounded Knee. And that third force was the Goon Squad.
What is the mood among your people at this time?
They're very ticked off,
What are they doing right now?
shining their guns up.
As tribal chairman, Wilson wielded supreme authority on Pine Ridge. He erected his own roadblocks outside the federal perimeter. Even U.S. officials had to go through him.
As far as you're going? Well, I want him to go in.
You don't have to get Wilson.
Well, you don't have to get it. I'm taking it.
And you're who?
I'm Wayne Colburn, the director of the U.S. Marshal Service.
Well, what do you think? Let him in?
These goons were armed, and they frequently got in between the federal lines and the Wounded Knee perimeter and shot in both directions with the intent of provoking firefights, because they were angry that the government didn't go in and take over Wounded Knee.
Inside the village, the protesters had their own military operation, led by Indians trained by the government they now took up arms against.
There was a lot of people there that had been in Vietnam, and a lot of people had just been in the military. Some older people had come in and they'd actually been in Korea. They knew how to give orders, they knew how to take orders, and they knew how to do things that they didn't have to be told twice.
I knew we were making history for our people. It didn't all happen in the 1800s. We're still fighting in the modern day. I mean, that's how I felt, that it was a continuation. And that's why I was not afraid. I was not afraid.
In the 19th century, the Lakota fought furiously to defend their territory against relentless American expansion. In 1868, embattled Lakota chiefs signed the Fort Laramie Treaty to protect more than 30 million acres of their land. But the United States soon reneged and forced the Lakota onto small, desolate reservations.
Americans like to think that American Indian history is something in the past. I'm one generation removed from the genocide of my tribe. And every tribe in this country has a time of horror. I mean, a time of absolute horror when they were confronted by this invader. And some had happened almost 500 years ago. But as they come across the plains, our time of horror came in the late 1800s, and we remember it very well.
In the frigid winter of 1890, Chief Bigfoot was leading a group of Dakota, mainly women and children, to shelter on the Pine Ridge Reservation. On the morning of December 29th, they were attacked by the U.S. Army on the banks of Wounded Knee Creek.
My great-grandmother is Katie Warbonnet. She was a survivor at Wounded Knee. When the shooting broke out, she and her sister got Keeksawi, ran down into the ravine and made it to some plum bushes. and she could hear the firing and the firing and hollering, and then finally it was quiet.
More than 300 Lakota people lay dead. After remaining untouched in the ice and snow for 3 days, they were buried in a mass grave. The massacre would mark the brutal end of centuries of armed Indian resistance. For those who came nearly 100 years later, Wounded Knee was sacred land.
I walked over to a gully and I picked up some sage and I went to wash myself and I prayed to those ancestors that were there.